Hey guys, it's your boy Harris and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to do a behind the scenes of how I shoot my B-roll, how I do my handheld transitions, tips and tricks, so let's get into it. So, in the last video, we did a breakdown, the fundamentals of how I shoot my B-roll, what's my camera setup, what's my go-to lenses, but in this video, we're going to do a behind the scenes, had a GoPro on my chest, and I get to show you the techniques, the in-camera transitions, how I like to shoot, and hopefully you can learn something and cherry pick something that works for you. This video will be split into 3 different sections. Number 1, camera setup. Number 2, in-camera transitions. And number 3, camera movement. They'll be in the comment section down below with the timestamps, so you can skip ahead if there's something you really want to get. Let's get going. From my last video, I collaborated with Sean LDV, who I'll be collaborating again, because the last video was very successful. He got 2 paying clients from that 30-second Instagram video. If you haven't watched that video, link up above, I highly recommend it. It makes sense to watch that one first before watching this video where we go in a deep dive and show you actually how to move the camera. Anyway, let's get started on my camera setup. So in this particular B-roll sequence, I use 2 Fuji bodies, 2 X-T3s, my personal camera of choice. And the reason why I do that is because I like to shoot in 50 frames per second, because I'm in the UK, we use PAL, that's why we use 50 instead of 60, otherwise we get that weird light flicker. And on the other camera, I like to shoot at 100 frames per second. For 50 frames per second, we use a Sigma 18-35. I know a lot of you have been asking, how does that look in video? What's the results like? Can it keep up? And I have to tell you, yes. The reason why I did that is so I can get a nice wide shot. If you looked at the previous video, I explained that it's good to shoot wide for Instagram videos purely because when you come into crop, you can actually still keep the subject nice and tight in the frame. For 100 frames per second, I use my favorite lens, the 56mm f1.2. You must be thinking, why would you use that for video, especially handheld? And the reason is because if you're shooting at 100 frames per second and you're shooting handheld, it'll be a lot easier to kind of get away with a bit of camera movement, a bit of camera jitter. And in the following steps, I'm going to explain how you can mitigate that. Now, when you put these 2 frame rates together, you can see that I like to use the wide angle, the 18-35, to kind of give me my base, my introductory shot to whatever sequence is going on. Then for the 100 frames per second, I like to use the 56 and get the small details, get a bit more of the particular moments, if you know what I mean, just to kind of finesse and round off that movement, that motion. So in the example right now, you can see that as he's pushing the weights, you have that nice tracking shot with the 56. It gives a bit more detail, a bit more close up, and then we can punch out with the wide angle and it's a lot faster. So having those 2 frame rates really complement each other so it's not boring. It makes the video a lot more dynamic. I don't want my video to be one full length B-roll sequence slowed down 5 times, all shot at 100 frames per second. That can get very boring very quickly. This is a fitness video after all, so we need to make sure it has a punch. So someone in the comment section last time asked, why didn't you use the Sigma 18-35 as opposed to using 2 bodies? Well, to be honest, I still prefer using 2 bodies, but I took your recommendation because I was curious. I was like, you know what? Using the Sigma might be quite interesting. And in this shot particularly, I used the Sigma. So I punched in at 35, got a nice establishing shot, and then I punched out straight to 18mm, and you can see the results were quite pleasing. So if you are someone who only has one body, definitely use a zoom lens. I would highly recommend the Sigma 18-35. I mean, I can only recommend what I've used, so, you know. Because you know what I mean, like, the best tool is the one you have. So if you only have one body, make the most of it, use a zoom lens. It works fine. I just really love prime lenses, as you can tell. This is the only zoom lens I actually own. Moving on to in-camera transitions. This is something that since I started my YouTube channel, a lot of you have been asking, how do you do it? Show me, don't talk about it. Actually show me how do you do it, and we're gonna do it. I'm gonna show you how I bloody do it. And a lot of you who are professionals might not like it, but for me who's a run and gun, it saved my ass. It helps me so much. I don't need to use a gimbal, I don't need to carry around a lot of stuff, and I'll explain why. I use a Peak Design camera strap because I have the anchors on my Fuji body. I can take them on and off super quick. Now the technique is As you can see from the GoPro footage, I usually have it around my neck and I lock my elbows in so the camera has 3 points of contact. I wouldn't recommend using this for like, let's say a live concert or a live recording or like a documentary. There's no need for that. This is purely for like a run and gun. You're doing a travel video, you're running around the streets in a busy city. Gimbals are not really practical. For me, this is practical. If I just want to get a few B-roll clips to put in later and I want them to be quite steady, this works at a pinch and it's super handy. I'm at a gym, it's a public gym. I don't want to have too much equipment. I don't want to make people feel intimidated. For me, this works really well. I've used it in pretty much my whole filmmaking career and it works perfectly fine. So the way to do it is, as you can see from the GoPro footage, I move with my hips. I swing in and swing out. I pan in and whip pan out. A lot of filmmakers use this technique. We did plan every single shot, and if anyone mentions that, oh, you don't bloody plan your shots, listen, we plan every single shot. We know what we're gonna do. But what this does, it gives me options. You see, as I pan in, that's one transition. I pause, I'll let him do his activity, then I pan out. So when it comes to editing, whatever seems to work, whatever fits the story, whatever fits the flow of the music, because we don't know exactly till we get into the editing suite what's gonna happen. So I can choose if I want to pan in or pan out. And the main key is you pan in and you pause for a couple of seconds, you get the shot, you make sure it's there. What about focus? How do you actually focus and get the shot? If you pan out, the focus will change and compose to something else. So this is what I've done to my Fuji body. I used to shoot on Canon and I used to have an AF on button, which I used to use all the time. I used to focus on the subject, lock the focus in, and then I would pan in and out. The great thing about doing that is once you've locked the focus and you move somewhere else and then you're panning in, whatever's panning in is out of focus, so it also gives you an even better motion blur. So you don't have to use presets or anything. You have your own kind of unique transition that follows the scene. I've made the AFL button my focus lock button. If whatever camera brand you have, you can always dedicate an autofocus lock button. So definitely use that. So that's my technique. That's how I get my transitions, and they work beautifully for whatever video you're doing because they're bespoke. And that's why I don't actually ever use any presets for transitions. I've never needed to, and it's really hard to use that now when I know that I can make a bespoke, made for that specific video that you're making, your own transition. For example, in this scene right here, you can see that I have a little light flicker that transitions into another sequence. And the way I did that was we were on the treadmills and I noticed the lights, and if you pan round the lights, it starts with dark to light and back to dark. And usually when something has a dark beginning point, light middle point, and dark end point, when you pan through that and you add 2 shots on either side, it gives a nice kind of round off. So it's not too jarring, it's not too odd. You do have to experiment, you do need to play with a bit of speed ramping to try and make sure it works. With 50 frames per second, the transitions work a lot better, they're a lot more smooth. With 100 or 120 frames per second, it's a lot more tricky. You kind of need to be a bit quicker. You need to make sure that you flick the camera a lot more because there's more frames there, so there's less motion blur. With more motion blur, this technique works even better. But yeah, just to round off this category, make your own in-camera transitions, super easy, doesn't cost you anything. The white balance matches the scene, the colors of the sequence matches the scene, it's unique, it's bespoke, it makes it look like that you've gone the extra mile and you've really put your heart into this video. Next up is the camera movement. Camera movement is something which took me a lot of time to get right, but once you nail it, it's really hard to go back to a gimbal. I mean, here's an example right now. As Sean LDV is moving the weights up and down, you can see that I'm rocking and tilting, capturing it, and when I switch to a different lens, it just works so beautifully. It looks like a high production. You have that multicam sequence. Having that camera strap really helps to lock in the camera, make sure it doesn't jiggle too much or wobble, and you can pan and capture whatever he's doing. Here's another example with the scene of him running and pushing the weights. That was with a 56mm, and I was able to gradually track him with that lens. So people that say that you can't use this lens for filmmaking, you can. Remember, the key with camera movement is to lock your elbows in and move with your hips. move with your whole body. You are a human gimbal. A bloody human gimbal. So just to recap, you don't need to do anything fancy. This is all very subtle, just gradual rock and tilting, and you can get yourself shots that look like they were taken on a gimbal. So that's how I do it. That's how I shoot B-roll for pretty much everything. I even do this for weddings. I do use a gimbal now because I do want to get more of a walking and tracking, getting the bride and groom, but pretty much 90% of my filmmaking life is handheld with a camera strap. So yeah, you can do it. I even shot a whole concert for an artist and stood there the whole time and gave like a nice swaying handheld effect, and it worked, but it was very, you know, you feel it in your neck in the morning, so I wouldn't recommend it, but things are possible. There is workarounds. You just have to use the tools around you. For me personally, this is what I like to do. It doesn't cost me much. I don't need to carry much. I'm very versatile and flexible on a shoot. I can change cameras, change lenses. I don't have to kind of recalibrate stuff. Being able to make a video with my hands is just something which is like really fulfilling for myself personally. I don't know if any of you out there come from artistic backgrounds, but you'll know what I mean. Making stuff with your hands. I didn't think that was possible with filmmaking, but now that I've made it into reality, it's just, I find it really fulfilling for myself. So take what you need. If there's something that you like and you end up trying it and it works for you, great. Try it, keep it. If you see something and you're like, that doesn't really work for me, it's not really for my style of video, fair enough. But now you've learned something new, you can pass it on to someone else who's wondering how to achieve a certain look, maybe without a gimbal, maybe they're on a low budget, and this could really help them out. Now, I just want to show you quickly how this video all comes together, the full sequence. This is going to be for his IGTV. There's a link down below to Sean's Instagram. I hope you enjoy the sequence. So I'm really excited to see what this video does for Sean, because the first video that we did together, he got 2 paying clients off Instagram. You can hear it from him himself.
Feedback was really good. After the video, I had so many people just asking me about exercise routines, fitness routines, nutrition routines and all whatnot. And yeah, like I've got so far 2 paying customers. I've got one guy that I'm helping online for an online workout. So yeah, after the video, there was a lot of positive feedback.
Sick, man. So hopefully after this next video we can get this guy way more clients. Really sorry about the audio, but I thought it was very valuable for filmmakers to see the potential of what your art can do for clients, what your service, you know, you're more than just a filmmaker, you're helping them tell the story, helping them develop their brand. Really sorry for the audio. Unfortunately, we're in a gym, they're playing radio music and it was blasting through, so I had to manipulate it and remove any melody that could potentially strike this video. If you like what you see in this video, guys, here's my Instagram, check it out. I've got some FAQ videos down below in the description box down below. And if you like Fujifilm, if you like camera gear, if you like to see the behind the scenes or what I do, week in, week out, this is the right channel. It's your boy Hvris Ahmed. Yes, Hvris, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.